My 5-year-old daughter, Maya, stood at the center of our family's dining room, her tiny hands trembling as she clutched a mysterious velvet pouch. The room buzzed with conversation, wine glasses clinking, laughter echoing off the walls. But I could see the storm brewing in her dark eyes. Everyone was too consumed with their own merriment to notice the small girl in the emerald dress she'd insisted on wearing. Everyone except me. I watched as she approached her step-grandmother with deliberate steps, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Nana Rose, Mama said to give you this when you made me feel like I didn't matter anymore." The room didn't just go quiet. It went dead. Conversations died mid-sentence, forks suspended in air. Even the background music seemed to fade away. Nana Rose's practiced smile faltered as she stared down at the innocent-looking pouch. But when she opened it and saw what lay inside, the sound that escaped her throat was inhuman, a wail so raw and desperate it made the crystal glasses vibrate. But here's what nobody in that room knew. This moment had been orchestrated for 6 months, and what was inside that pouch would expose a family secret so devastating it would shatter everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and what it really means to belong. When I first met Daniel, I believed I was stepping into a fairy tale. The Rodriguez family seemed like something out of a heartwarming movie, boisterous gatherings every weekend, impromptu barbecues that lasted until midnight, holiday celebrations that required 3 tables just to seat everyone. Nana Rose, Daniel's stepmother who'd raised him since he was 8, commanded the family like a benevolent queen. Her opinions shaped decisions. Her approval meant everything, and her disapproval could freeze you out faster than a winter storm. I craved her acceptance with an intensity that should have been my first warning sign. Initially, Rose welcomed me with open arms. She praised my homemade tamales, complimented my choice in clothing, and even gave me her grandmother's recipe for tres leches cake, something she'd never shared with anyone outside blood family. I felt chosen, special, like I'd finally found the mother figure I'd lost when I was 12. But fairy tales, as we all know, often hide darker truths beneath their shimmering surface. The cracks began to show slowly, almost imperceptibly. Group text messages would go out about family events, and somehow my name would be mysteriously absent. Rose would make subtle comments about how different I was from the other Rodriguez women, how my background was so unique compared to their traditions. She'd smile while delivering these little cuts, making me question whether I was being oversensitive or if there was genuine malice hiding behind her warm facade. Then Maya entered our lives, and everything changed in ways I could never have anticipated. Maya was my daughter from my previous relationship, a bright, curious 3-year-old with eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. When Daniel and I got serious, he didn't just accept her. He embraced her with a love so fierce and immediate it took my breath away. He read her bedtime stories in both English and Spanish, taught her to ride a bike, and never once made her feel like anything less than his own flesh and blood. When we married 18 months later, the adoption papers were already signed and sealed. In our home, there was no step anything, just father and daughter, connected by choice rather than chance. But Rose never got that memo, and what happened next will shock you to your core. At first, Rose put on a convincing performance of acceptance. Birthday cards arrived for Maya right on schedule, though they were always generic rather than personalized. Holiday gifts appeared, but they felt perfunctory, hastily chosen items that bore no resemblance to Maya's actual interests. While her biological grandchildren received thoughtful presents that showed deep knowledge of their personalities, Maya got whatever was convenient or on sale. Children notice everything, remember everything, and feel everything more deeply than we adults often realize. The breaking point that started this entire chain of events happened during last summer's family reunion. Rose had commissioned custom photo albums for each grandchild, beautiful leather-bound books filled with family memories, their names embossed in silver on the covers. One by one, she called the children forward to receive their treasures.
Maya watched with growing excitement as her cousins squealed over photos of camping trips, birthday parties, and holiday celebrations.
When Rose finally called Maya's name, she handed her a slim, store-bought photo album, the kind you can pick up at any pharmacy. Inside were a handful of random family photos, none featuring Maya prominently, and several pages that were completely empty. The difference was so stark, so deliberately cruel, that even the other adults began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. That night, as I tucked Maya into bed, she looked up at me with those impossibly wise eyes and whispered, "Mama, why doesn't Nana Rose love me the same way she loves Sophia and Diego?" My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, but what came next would change everything. You won't believe how far Daniel was willing to go to protect his daughter. Daniel became a man possessed after that night. He'd disappear into his home office for hours, emerging with red-rimmed eyes and a jaw set in grim determination. When I asked what was consuming him, he'd just say, "I'm making sure this never happens again," in a voice I'd never heard before, cold, calculated, and absolutely resolute. 3 months later, he sat Maya down in our kitchen and placed a small velvet pouch in her tiny hands. The fabric was deep purple, soft as a whisper, and tied with a golden cord that seemed to glow in the morning light. "This is for Nana Rose," Daniel said, his voice gentle but carrying an undertone of steel. "But only if she makes you feel invisible again. Only when you're ready to remind her of something very important." I demanded to know what was inside that pouch. Daniel looked at me with eyes that held years of accumulated pain and said simply, "The truth. Something she's been trying to forget for 15 years. The pouch sat on Maya's dresser for months like a ticking time bomb, waiting for the right moment to explode. That moment came during Rose's elaborate birthday celebration last weekend. The Rodriguez family had gathered at her sprawling hacienda-style home, the same place where I'd once felt so welcomed but now felt more like a battlefield where my daughter fought daily for recognition. The evening began predictably. Rose holding court in her favorite armchair, surrounded by children and grandchildren vying for her attention, while Maya hovered at the edges like a ghost, hoping to be acknowledged. The gift-giving ceremony was Rose's favorite ritual. She'd sit like a queen on her throne, calling each grandchild forward to receive their treasures, while the adults watched with champagne glasses raised in celebration. Sophia received a diamond necklace that had belonged to Rose's mother. Diego got a vintage watch and a thick envelope stuffed with cash. Maya's cousin Isabella unwrapped a designer handbag and squealed with delight. Then came Maya's turn, and what Rose did next was so cruel it took my breath away. Rose held up a small gift bag with the same enthusiasm one might show for taking out the trash. "This is for you, sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I didn't want you to feel left out." Inside the bag was a coloring book, a cheap, generic coloring book featuring cartoon animals, and a box of broken crayons that looked like they'd been salvaged from a restaurant floor. The tag attached read simply, "To Daniel's little friend. Not granddaughter, not family, friend." That's when I saw Daniel's subtle nod toward Maya, and I knew the moment we'd all been dreading had finally arrived. Maya disappeared upstairs and returned carrying the velvet pouch like she was bearing the weight of justice itself. She walked through that crowded room with a determination that silenced conversations as she passed, her emerald dress rustling like whispered secrets. When she reached Rose and spoke those carefully rehearsed words, I felt the entire foundation of our family shift beneath our feet. Rose's manicured fingers trembled as she accepted the pouch, her confident smile wavering like a candle in the wind. "What's this, little one?" she asked, trying to maintain her queenly composure, but I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. Maya didn't answer. She simply stepped back and waited, her small hands clasped behind her back, like a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. Rose opened the pouch with theatrical flair, expecting perhaps a handmade card or child's drawing. What she found instead drained the color from her face so completely I thought she might faint. Inside the pouch, nestled like a coiled serpent ready to strike, was a USB drive. But this wasn't just any USB drive. It was silver, engraved with words that made Rose's hand shake so violently she nearly dropped it. The real Rodriguez family history. Attached to the drive was a note in Daniel's precise handwriting. If Maya is reading this to you, it means you've forgotten what family really means. Plug this into the TV and remember why blood isn't always thicker than water. The room fell into a silence so profound you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Rose stared at the drive like it was a venomous snake, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and finally, absolute terror. "What is this?" she whispered, but the question came out strangled and weak. Daniel stood slowly, his voice calm but carrying the weight of years of suppressed anger. "It's the truth, Mom. The truth you made me promise never to tell. And what happened next will leave you speechless, because the secret Daniel was about to reveal would explain everything about Rose's treatment of Maya, and it's something no one in that room saw coming." With shaking hands, Rose inserted the USB drive into the television. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly we were looking at old home videos, grainy footage from what appeared to be the 1980s. A young woman with dark hair was playing with a small boy, laughing as they built sandcastles on a beach. The woman looked remarkably like Rose, but younger, softer somehow. "Do you remember her, Mom?" Daniel's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Do you remember Maria?" Rose's face went white as fresh snow. Several family members leaned forward, confused. They'd never heard the name Maria before, but I could see in Rose's eyes that this name carried the weight of buried secrets. The video continued, showing more scenes of the woman and child, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, quiet moments of maternal love. Then Daniel appeared on screen, much younger, pointing to something off camera and speaking in rapid Spanish to the woman who was clearly not Rose. "Maria was my biological mother," Daniel continued, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "She died when I was 8, and you married my father 6 months later. You promised him you'd love me like your own son, and for a while you did. But you also made me promise never to mention her name again, never to speak of her to anyone, never to acknowledge that she existed." The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Rose's siblings looked stunned. They'd been told that Daniel's mother had abandoned the family, not that she'd died and been systematically erased from history. But the revelation that would shatter everything was still coming. "The reason you can't love Maya," Daniel said, his voice breaking slightly, "is because she reminds you of your own secret. You see, Maya isn't just my stepdaughter by choice. She's my stepdaughter by circumstance, just like I was your stepson by circumstance. And you've spent 15 years trying to pretend that love by choice isn't real family, when you of all people should know that it's the most real family there is." The video shifted to show documents, adoption papers, marriage certificates, medical records. Rose had adopted Daniel legally when she married his father, just as Daniel had adopted Maya. The parallel was undeniable, unavoidable, and devastating. "You erased my mother from our family history because acknowledging her meant acknowledging that blended families can be real families," Daniel continued. "But every time you look at Maya and see her as less than your real grandchildren, you're doing to her exactly what you were afraid people would do to me, treating her like she doesn't belong because she didn't start here." Rose's carefully constructed world was crumbling before our eyes, and what she did next was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. Instead of apologizing, instead of acknowledging the pain she'd caused, Rose did what bullies do when cornered. She attacked. "How dare you!" she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "How dare you expose private family business like this? You've turned that child into a weapon against me." Daniel's response was quiet but devastating. "I didn't turn Maya into anything. I just gave her the truth, something you never gave me." Rose turned her fury on me, her finger pointing accusingly. "This is all her fault. She poisoned you against your own family. Before her, you knew your place." I stood slowly,
my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My daughter gave you the chance to remember what love looks like. You chose to forget instead. But Rose wasn't finished. In her desperation, she revealed the ugliest truth of all. She's not even your real daughter. Why should I treat her like family when she's not even family to you? The silence that followed was deafening. Maya stood perfectly still, absorbing words that would have destroyed a less resilient child. But instead of crumbling, she looked up at Daniel with absolute trust and said, "Daddy, can we go home now?" That simple word, "Daddy," spoken with such pure love and confidence, was the final blow to Rose's crumbling facade. Daniel scooped Maya into his arms, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, baby. Let's go home to our real family."
As we gathered our coats and prepared to leave, Rose made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "If you walk out that door, don't ever come back. You're choosing her over blood family." Daniel paused in the doorway, Maya still in his arms, and delivered the final blow. "I'm choosing love over obligation. I'm choosing truth over tradition. And I'm choosing my daughter over your dysfunction. We should have done this years ago." We walked out of that house together, Daniel, Maya, and me, leaving behind a room full of people grappling with truths they'd never imagined, and a woman whose carefully constructed lies had finally collapsed under the weight of their own cruelty. In the car, Maya buckled her seatbelt and sat quietly for several minutes. Then, in that matter-of-fact way children have of processing earth-shattering events, she asked, "Daddy, will Nana Rose ever love me now?" Daniel met her eyes in the rearview mirror, his voice gentle but honest. "I don't know, baby, but it doesn't matter anymore, because we know you're loved, really, truly loved." Maya nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we get ice cream on the way home?" And just like that, with the resilience that makes children so remarkable, she began moving forward into a future where her worth wasn't determined by someone else's capacity for love. The aftermath wasn't the dramatic confrontation I'd expected. No angry phone calls, no guilt-laden text messages, no family members choosing sides in some epic battle. Just silence, profound, telling silence that spoke louder than any argument could have. But what happened next will restore your faith in the power of true family bonds. 3 weeks after our dramatic exit, a package arrived at our door. It was addressed to Maya in careful, childish handwriting. Inside was a bracelet made of colorful beads, clearly handmade, along with a letter from her cousin Sophia that brought tears to my eyes. "Dear Maya, I'm sorry Nana Rose was mean to you. I didn't know about your daddy's first mommy, but Uncle Daniel showed me her picture and she was beautiful like you. I made this bracelet with beads that match your eyes. You're my cousin forever and always, no matter what anyone says. I love you, Sophia. P.S. Diego says hi and he's sorry too." Maya read that letter 3 times, then carefully placed the bracelet on her wrist where it stayed for weeks. That simple gesture from another child meant more to her than all of Rose's expensive gifts combined, because it came from genuine love rather than obligatory performance. As for Daniel, the man I married transformed before my eyes. For years he'd carried the burden of keeping Rose's secrets, of protecting her image, while sacrificing his own truth. After that night, I watched him shed layers of guilt and obligation that had been weighing him down since childhood. "I should have done this years ago," he told me one evening as we watched Maya play in our backyard, free and unburdened in a way she'd never been before. "You did it exactly when Maya needed you to," I replied. "Timing isn't always about us. Sometimes it's about waiting until the person we're protecting is strong enough to handle the truth." We began building new traditions after that. Smaller, more intimate, completely authentic celebrations that honored our chosen family, rather than performing for people who couldn't see our worth. Maya helped us plant a garden where we grew vegetables for our neighbors. We started monthly movie nights with blanket forts and homemade popcorn. We didn't try to replace what we'd lost. We focused on nurturing what we'd gained. 6 months later, something happened that proved the power of truth to heal even the deepest wounds. Daniel received a phone call from his uncle Roberto, Rose's brother, who'd been at that fateful dinner. Roberto asked if he could meet with Daniel privately, and what he revealed changed everything we thought we knew about family loyalty. "I've been thinking about that night for months," Roberto said, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup as they sat in our kitchen. "About Maria, about the promises we all made to keep quiet, about the lies we told ourselves were protecting people." He paused, gathering courage for what came next. "I have boxes of photos and videos of your mother that Rose made us hide away, letters she wrote to you before she died, a journal where she talked about how much she loved you and how she hoped you'd understand someday why she had to leave so young." Daniel's eyes filled with tears as Roberto continued. "We thought we were protecting you from grief by erasing her memory. Instead, we stole your right to mourn her properly, to remember her love, to carry her with you in a healthy way." That afternoon, Roberto brought over 3 boxes filled with treasures from Daniel's early childhood. Photos of birthday parties where his mother's face glowed with pride, videos of Christmas mornings where her laughter filled the room, letters written in her careful script expressing hopes and dreams for her son's future. But the most precious item was a small wooden box that contained something extraordinary. A letter Maria had written to Daniel's future children, sealed and saved for the day he became a father himself. With shaking hands, Daniel opened the envelope that had waited 15 years to be read. Inside, his mother's words reached across time to embrace the granddaughter she'd never met. "To my son's precious children. If you're reading this, it means my Daniel has found love and created a family of his own. Know that you are loved not just by the parents who raise you, but by a grandmother whose heart held space for you before you were even born. Family isn't about blood or biology. It's about the love we choose to give and receive. Love each other fiercely, forgive each other freely, and remember that the strongest families are built on truth, not tradition. All my love, Abuela Maria." Maya listened as Daniel read the letter aloud, her eyes wide with wonder. "She wrote this for me," she asked, "even though she didn't know me?" "She wrote it for love itself," Daniel replied, "for the idea that love grows bigger, not smaller, when we share it." That letter became the foundation of a new family tradition. Every year on the anniversary of Maria's death, we celebrate her life and her wisdom. We look through the photos Roberto returned to us. We share stories about the grandmother Maya never met, but who loved her before she existed. And we remember that the most powerful families are those built on choice, truth, and unconditional love. As for Rose, she remains a cautionary tale in our family story, a reminder of what happens when we let fear and pride override love and acceptance. We haven't seen or spoken to her since that dramatic dinner, and honestly, the absence of her negativity has allowed our family to flourish in ways we never imagined possible. Maya, now 6 years old, occasionally asks about Nana Rose, but not with sadness or longing. She asks with the curious detachment of a child who has moved beyond needing validation from people who aren't capable of giving it. "Is Nana Rose still sad about forgetting how to love?" she asked recently while we were baking cookies together. "I think she might be," I answered honestly. "But that's not something we can fix for her. We can only make sure we remember how to love each other." Maya nodded seriously, then brightened. "Well, I'm glad Daddy taught me how to love the right way. And I'm glad Abuela Maria wrote me that letter, even though she's in heaven." That simple statement encapsulated everything we'd gained by choosing truth over comfort, love over obligation, and authenticity over performance. The velvet pouch that started this entire journey now sits in my jewelry box, not as a reminder of pain,
but as a symbol of the courage it takes to demand the love we deserve. Maya doesn't need it anymore. She has something far more powerful now. She has the unshakable knowledge that she is chosen, protected, and valued exactly as she is. Sometimes I think about alternate versions of this story. What might have happened if we'd continued to accept Rose's treatment? If we'd kept making excuses and hoping for change that never came? I think about the version of Maya who might have grown up believing she had to earn love, had to shrink herself to fit into spaces that didn't welcome her, had to accept less because someone else refused to give more. That version of Maya doesn't exist because her father chose courage over comfort, because he chose to break generational cycles of secrecy and shame, because he understood that protecting his daughter's worth was more important than protecting his stepmother's feelings. The truth Daniel revealed that night didn't just free Maya from Rose's cruelty, it freed him from 15 years of carrying someone else's shame, freed our entire family from the exhausting performance of pretending dysfunction was normal, and freed future generations from inheriting the same toxic patterns. Children like Maya don't need perfect families. They need authentic ones. They need adults who will stand up for them when they're too small to stand up for themselves. They need parents who understand that love without boundaries isn't really love at all.
That velvet pouch contained more than just evidence of Rose's hypocrisy. It contained the key to our family's freedom. Freedom from toxic relationships, freedom from generational trauma, freedom from the crushing weight of other people's expectations. Maya carries herself differently now. She walks into rooms like she belongs there, speaks up when something isn't fair, and loves without the desperate need for approval that once defined her interactions with Rose. She's learned that her worth isn't negotiable, that true family doesn't make you earn your place at the table, that love should add to your life rather than subtract from it. If this story resonates with you, if it reminds you of your own battles with toxic family dynamics, or your own journey toward choosing authentic love over performative relationships, know that you're not alone. Sometimes the smallest voices do carry the loudest truths, and sometimes a child's simple demand to be seen can shatter years of carefully constructed lies. The most powerful lesson Maya taught us isn't about standing up to bullies or exposing family secrets. It's about understanding that we teach people how to treat us, and that love without respect isn't really love at all. She showed us that family isn't about who shares your DNA, but about who shares your values, your joys, your struggles, and your unwavering commitment to each other's well-being. That little girl in the emerald dress didn't just deliver a message that night. She delivered our entire family into a future where love is freely given and freely received, where truth matters more than tradition, and where every child knows without question that they are seen, valued, and absolutely, unconditionally cherished. And that, more than any dramatic confrontation or family secret, is the real victory in this story. The quiet triumph of a child who refused to remain invisible, and the parents who finally found the courage to make sure she never had to.